So if you'd like to welcome, we've got Donna Adams-Allen, one of the local funding officers from the Lottery Community Fund. I will move that down.
Quite a few slides. I'm going to rattle through. There's quite a lot of information, but it will all come together in the end. So, and we'll have time for questions. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. We don't fund many community radios. I've been a funding officer for 4 years now, and I can recall 2 community radios coming to decision panel in the whole of the last 4 years. So, being here today is great for me. It was really good sitting there for the last 15, 20 minutes and getting a sense of how community radios work and the power of volunteering, and that is massively important to us, and I'll cover some of that in a little bit. So, those are the things I'm going to go through, and as I say, we'll rattle through. I'm a bit of a talker, so I blame my Irish ancestry there, so we might go off on a little tangent, we might cover some of the slides, we might cover all of the slides, we'll see. Okay, so I'm hoping and guessing you know a little bit about us as a fund. So we are the largest community funder in the UK, if not Europe. And we distribute, we've distributed £30 million every week. So my CEO, a couple of days ago, gave us some statistics in his monthly catch-up, and we fund a community project on average once every 7 minutes. So that just gives you the reach that we work within. So in Sandwell, which is one of the areas that I cover, we gave out almost £5.5 million last year. And you can see the average grant size and how many grants we made. And this year it's looking to be just as busy, just as competitive. And the most prevalent themes are around communities and around that well-being. And we are very much seeing and hearing that radios really play a part in keeping people sort of, connected, reducing that isolation, and definitely through COVID, we're hearing a lot of how radios play a part in that. So we have very broad goals. We support ideas. We want to fund things that bring communities together, that tackle those real issues around isolation. We want to support organisations to come together, so to collaborate, to work together, rather than working in a real disjointed way. And obviously we support non-profit making organisations, so whether you are a charity, a CIC, a social enterprise, community benevolent company, those are the organisations that we fund. Occasionally we do fund profit making organisations, so your private companies, but they are generally ones that come into us as part of a partnership with a non-profit making organisation leading. So I've mentioned our vision, our very, very broad vision, mission, values, connections, and our priorities, very much around community-led. And what I've heard from you this morning is around how radios harness the power of the community, so using local people as volunteers and supporting them and upskilling them to sort of go on their onward journey. So you really sort of align with that vision for us. We want to understand how organisations that come to us, how do you support and how do you harness that power of your community? So how are you supporting people to bring the strengths that they have to improve your project? So it's not just around people coming in and accessing some training. How are you looking at what skills they have that can also support you? How are you learning from them when they come to you? So we're open to all. We don't have open and closing dates on our programmes. So we have rolling programmes. We don't have if you come to us and you're unsuccessful, don't darken our door again. So we very much have that open door, and we're open to having those ongoing conversations. We're really flexible, both in our application process and our grant management process. So if you like forms and you like a very structured application process, this might be a bit of a shock. So we are very, very flexible in how we fund and our funding timescales. We don't have a timescale once you start talking to us to submit your idea. Our grant management and our application process is very proportionate to the amount you're asking for. So we would support someone who was maybe asking us for £20,000, £30,000 slightly differently to someone who was coming in for maybe £500,000. We would ask far more of the larger asking organisation. And it's a real conversational approach. You submit an idea to us via our web portal, and I will give you the links later on, but that is the start of it. So what you submit is the start of our conversation. What then goes to a decision panel may be slightly different through those conversations we have, and it might be the second, third or fourth iteration that eventually goes to panel. We'll work with you and support you in developing that. So I've mentioned our priorities, so stronger relationships, so not just with those that you're supporting, but also with your wider network of organisations. So how do you link in? What is that web of support that sits behind you as an organisation? We also look at how projects that come to us are interested in sustaining their local environment. So we'll look at things like your environmental policies, your sustainability policies. So we'll look at all of those things when you apply to us. And we also want to understand how organisations really tackle some of that. How are you getting in? How are you supporting your communities at the earliest point? How are you supporting those who come to you to fulfil their potential, or your listeners, your beneficiaries? So how are you getting the best out of your community, your volunteers and your staff? Definitely with regard to our larger long-term programmes, some of our programmes run up to 5 years, and we're being asked of organisations now, what does this mean? What do we have to commit to a specific delivery model over 5 years? You know, what if things shift and change again over the next couple of weeks and months and we can't get the numbers in that we've told you? That's fine. We're on the journey with organisations that we fund, and I mentioned we're really flexible as a funder. And we want to support organisations the best as we can. So we see that we give an organisation money to do what they do better or with a wider reach. So we're really flexible in the delivery model. The overarching aims of a project cannot change if you're awarded funding, but the means by which you achieve the project can change. So I think you might call them KPIs, your key performance indicators, so those can shift and change. So we have 3 main lottery programmes. So we have our small awards for all programme, which is, I think it starts about it starts at £300 up to £10,000. It's a very short and sharp programme. Funding has to be spent within 12 months. So if you're looking for something maybe to develop or pilot an idea or develop some training or a new way of working, that probably is something to think about. And it's a very, very quick turnaround. So 12 weeks from when you apply online. It is a very, very character-limited application. So definitely copy and paste into a Word document and have a play around and edit it before you send that in. Awards for All will make a decision on what you send to them. So Awards for All differs from the larger programmes that I sit on, where it's very conversational and we'll come back. Awards for All will not. They'll make a decision on what you send. So make sure what you send you are happy with and absolutely showcases your project to the best. The turnaround on that, I think, is 12 weeks. We've known it go down to as little as a week. So, you know, if you're waiting for something and you want something to turn around fairly quickly, Awards for All is a good place to start. So you're reaching communities and your partnerships. So that's where I generally sit on the larger grants, £10,000 and over. There is no upper limit on these grants. Although that said, bear in mind the figures I gave you earlier, which is the average grant size. We do see grants that edge up. And I've had grants that have edged up to 750k. Anything over 500k also goes to our England committee. for assessment and input. So there's an extra bit of time there with those. So just if you are thinking about coming in for a larger grant, make sure that you're just allowing some of the time, because they take in excess of 7-8 months. So I've mentioned our awards for all. So reaching communities, you're £10,000 and over, so they can run up to 5 years, so they're multi-year programmes. The average, the norm is about 3 or 4. It's not often we fund larger programmes over 1 or 2 years. The reason being is quite often we want you to look at how you measure the impact of these projects, and with something quite short term, by the time you've started and then you're looking at, the end, there's not always that time to have sort of bedded down the learning and got some of that real data together. So normally 3 or 4 years is the norm. So within that, we do expect to see, core costs. We do contribute to core costs, so it must be proportionate. We don't expect to cover the organisation's whole core costs, so it's proportionate to the project. And we fund organisation and development things. So you mentioned some training a little while ago. So quite often we are asked to cover training costs and support beneficiaries and volunteers to be able to to upskill throughout that. We don't fund anything more than, I think it's a level 3, so bear that in mind if you're going to come to us with some training costs. And also some capital costs as well. So we've funded new buildings around the place. So it's not often we fund a brand new build, but where there's a need, we will. It's more often than not refurbishment costs to bring it up to speed with to make it more environmentally friendly, or equality, so new toilets, things like that, we're generally asked to fund. So, how do you apply? I have popped the links to our portal within the presentation, so I'm assuming you'll all have copies of that. So the first port of call is our website, and there's an absolute wealth of guidance on there, so definitely have a look, get yourself a cuppa, and have a look through some of the projects we funded, how we funded them, and just make yourself aware of our processes. So it's very box character limited. So as I mentioned, for awards for, I think it's about 350 words per question, so really tight. Reaching communities is a little more than 500, but bear in mind with reaching communities, as I've said, that's the start of the conversation. So there's scope for us to come back to you and ask for more information as we go through, and most funding officers will do that. So once you've submitted your idea via the portal, we have 12 weeks to carry out an assessment. A funding officer will carry out an assessment. It will go to a first stage panel. The panel that is made up of staff from East and West Midlands, so we cover both, and they will decide whether to invite your idea for a full proposal, and we give you guidance on that, and your funding officer will support you through that. Or you will receive we are not taking this through at this time, and you'll receive some feedback with that. Your funding officer will go through the feedback. I have had lots of organisations that have come back after that feedback. They've revised their request, come back, been successful at the first stage, successful at the second stage, and then now off delivering. So take heart. If there's, if we feel that there's something in the idea and we want to support it, we'll be telling you at that point. So, go away, listen to that feedback, and then think about coming back to us. And as I say, it's not a case of don't darken our door again. We used to have a rule that you couldn't come back for 12 months. That's no longer the case. I've had organisations that have been unsuccessful, come straight back in the next day. So if you're invited through to the second stage, as I say, we send the guidance, what needs to go into the full proposal, what goes into that proposal, how you write that is completely up to you. I've had proposals from 13 pages to 130 pages and literally everything in between. So I've had videos embedded, I've had all sorts of things. And things with the videos really bring a paper to life, and the panel will always watch a video. So if you've got a very short video that really showcases what you do, get it in the document. Once you submit your full proposal, again, we have 12 weeks to come back to you with a decision. So our bits, either side of 12 weeks from when you submit. The bit in the middle, where you develop a full proposal, is how long's a piece of string. We don't put a time frame on that. It's what's best for you as an organisation. As long as we're communicating and we know roughly when you're hoping to submit, then that's fine. We'll keep that conversation going. So I've had a group now, they're about 15 months in from when they were invited through to the second stage, and they're still developing their proposal, and that's fine. So, who can apply? So I've mentioned the different types of organisations. We can't accept applications from sole traders, companies that pay profits outside the UK. Also, if you are, one of the things to bear in mind is, if you are asking us for capital funds, then we need to see a lease in the name of the organisation for at least 5 years with no break clause. So if any of you are thinking about coming in to sort of make your space more suitable for what you do, then bear that in mind. So what we ask you online, so these are a couple of the questions that we ask you when you're coming in for your first stage. As I mentioned, it's very character limited, so definitely have a play with that. I think one of the things with community radios that we've seen historically is who will benefit and what difference you'll make. So it's around really thinking about that ripple effect. What do people get from listening to the radio? What do people get from volunteering to the radio? So it's being able to sort of to quantify that, and also if you were successful, how would you measure that impact? So it's about thinking about those things when you first come into us. So I've just rattled through this. If you are successful, we ask you to return the application to us quickly, super quick, and a recent bank statement. So bank statements, in order to apply to us, even for a very small amount, £300, a bank statement needs to be in the name of your organisation. So just bear that in mind, because quite often we have bank accounts come in and they're in the name of a trustee, and there's no mention of the organisation that the trustees are part of. So just make sure that you have that tidied up, because if you're coming in for a small grant and they turn it around really quickly, they'll want to get the money out to you really quickly. And banks being the way they are at the moment, we're seeing 5, 6, 7 months to open and change accounts. So definitely sort of make sure those sort of things are squared away first. Definitely we want to know about how you support some of the community's vulnerable members. So if you're supporting, you mentioned the previous speakers around young people that are maybe disengaged from school, so we would want to know about, do you have the appropriate measures in place to support your vulnerable beneficiaries? So we would ask for those at the second stage. So again, just be mindful that we do ask for a lot of supporting information that you might not think we would at that point. And so if you are successful, and we are really, really super quick at getting the money into your bank. It used to be, I think, about a month or so after you were successful. We've moved on so far. I've had organisations, I've sent them out the offer letter. They've returned the signed offer letter and a bank statement to me the same day. We've had an induction conversation the next day and set up their project to start 2 days after, with their first payment going in within a week of us saying, hey, you've been funded. So we move quickly. We know organisations want the money to do what they're doing now, so we get that out to you as quick as we can. And I mentioned that we're proportionate in our approach, and that follows through not just application through to the grant management. If you've asked us for a fairly small amount of money, we're not going to be coming out and doing monitoring visits every week. We're fairly light touch. We put a lot of trust in our grant holders to do what they do. We do things like we monitor your social media accounts. So we get a sense of, you are doing this project is happening, and we will come out and do visits. As I say, it's very proportionate. So we normally come out and see a project maybe once every 6 months, and then we ask for an end of year written evaluation. So whatever we can, we try and make it as easy, because we don't want organisations sitting behind a desk completing end of grant and monitoring reports for 5, 6, 7 different funders, when actually you've got a day job to get out to do. So we try and make it as easy as possible and actually come out and see what you're doing, and sort of we take what we need from that. So there you are. Our main website, so if you want to have a look at the information for awards for all and reaching communities and partnerships. Reaching communities and partnerships are one and the same. They come out of the same process. The only difference is we want to understand how organisations are working together. So that's normally 2 or more organisations. So if you are working as a consortia, then, you know, that'll go down the partnership route. The process is the same, the timeframe's the same. It's just sort of, we ask for a little bit more detail around the roles and responsibilities within that consortia. So there are my details. There's also the Midlands email address, as some of you across the Midlands and East Midlands. There are 40 of me, so some a little bit taller, some not so. But there's 40 of me. They are all absolutely fab. You know, so if you wanted to ping me an email and ask who your local officer is so you can have a conversation before putting anything in writing, they are always more than happy to have that really informal conversation with you first.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Donna. I was going to say, I imagine a flurry of hands up, so hopefully we have lots of questions. I'll come to the microphone. Just remember to wait until you've got the microphone so we can capture it. I'm going to get my steps in today, I tell you.
Thanks, Donna. Keith here from Black Country Radio. Slightly different hat. I have to say right at the beginning of all this, so through various hats I wore, I've had both the large and small grants. Yep. But there's been something recently, it was quite specific, that given what you've just said, I'd like some clarification on. So we put in a bid to do some work with disengaged young people around this time last year. And I had to really pester and didn't get an answer until November. That's on stage 1. And then they knocked me out within a week. Then they mentioned, so there's 2 issues coming up. One is they then said, you didn't hit the local priorities. And I said, well, it had been helpful to know what those local priorities were. And they said, we don't tell you that.
Okay.
Which really wasn't a lot of help, because if he did then but tell me, and I could have rejigged the bid accordingly. And the second one, which I found even a bit more worrying, I said, is it worth me? It was a match fund. I'd got 90 grand from Arts Council, which I'd got. Okay. And it was a match fund to 90,000 to reach communities, which I didn't get. And I said, was it worth me bashing in a repeat? And he said, well, it is, but we won't look at it till next October. So in the end, we bashed in a 10 grand and got it within about a week, which is, you know, helpful. That's what I'm saying. It's been too. But so those 2 issues. One is this business about local priorities, which I'd not come across before, and I've been playing this game for about 20 years. And then the other one was around what he said to me around when we're not looking at it till October because we're too busy because of COVID.
Okay. Yep. I'll absolutely answer those. I am intrigued as to know what area, but I'll have that conversation with you later. And all I can say is the way I work with my grant holders, I am very open, very honest. I have very difficult conversations with my grant holders. But I think because I've worked in the sector for a long time before coming to the fund, my attitude is no one has time to spend writing an application that's not going to go anywhere. So I'll always have those conversations early on. Now, the thing with priorities, absolutely right. We don't promote our local priorities because they are local. Yeah, and they change from town to town. So I sit in the Black Country team, and even within that, my priorities in Walsall and Sandwell are completely different to Dudley and Wolverhampton. So we don't promote those widely. And because they shift and change because of what comes in. So, for example, in Walsall, at the moment, the only topic of conversation I am having is around youth wellbeing. And that, with our research and our evidence and our data that's coming into the fund, that's showing us with massive cuts to youth provision, that is something that we should focus on at this moment. And then we'll go through and we'll fund some services. And then that priority will shift and change depending on what else is coming in, what else we're seeing, what else we're hearing. So we don't promote those because actually, by the time we've put them out there, they may have shifted and changed. Okay, and they're very reactive to what comes in. So it may be, you know, as I said, what is a priority today may not be next week with what is coming in. So in terms of not being able to deal with an application until October, I don't know when you came in, so I don't know what your time frame was, but our time frames are 12 weeks. End of. I definitely don't leave things sitting in my pipeline until the 12 weeks. I like to get them in, I like to get them out. So well before the 12 weeks, we have 12 weeks. If we go over 12 weeks, we definitely get emails from high above to say, what is going on with this? Why hasn't it moved along? It may well be that things do stay where they are for more than 12 weeks because we're having a conversation with the organisation and waiting for some of that info to come back. So those are sometimes ones that stay there. Last year was exceptionally busy. We did pause, and nationally, we paused reaching communities, because we were focusing on some of the short-term, some of the COVID stuff, getting those emergency grants out. So any organisations that applied to us for reaching communities in that time would have been told their application was paused until we unpaused it at a certain point. So, and that wasn't us in the Midlands, that was the whole of the UK. There were no reaching communities applications moving. Even ones that had come in and were sitting at the first stage, second stage, set-up stage, whatever, they literally just froze where they were. So, and that was just us needing to sort of direct our manpower, if you like, towards dealing with some of the emergency stuff. We distributed, I think it was about, it wasn't the 300 million, I think it was about 60 million pounds from the government in a matter of 6 or 7 months. So we were out sort of dealing with that at that point.
So we've got stations from across the country as well as locally.
Yep.
From the sounds of it, with the local objectives and local aims, but also for the mainly for the reaching communities. Would you recommend, if a station is even thinking about it, trying to find out who their local funding officer is and have a phone call, a conversation from the start? Absolutely.
Lots of our funding officers carry out funding surgeries, and they will, they're always open to having that conversation first. So, I'm more than happy to put you in touch and broker that conversation. And as I mentioned when I first stood up here, one of the difficulties we found, and I think one of the reasons why community radios don't come to us, is because we want to understand how you measure that impact. So it's about you being able to articulate, one, what difference does and I say project, but I work in a world of projects. What difference does your project make to your beneficiaries? How does it improve and enhance their lives? So it's about you articulating that really clearly. But also, I would say with community radios, it's about telling us how you tackle some of those real entrenched needs in the communities, and that might be around isolation, that might be around supporting young people to stay engaged with school and raise their attainment and their aspirations and their self-confidence. That's the stuff you should be telling us. What we fund, and this going out of these four walls might be a little bit controversial. What we fund is irrelevant. The impact of what we fund is what we want to know. Okay.
Thank you. Any other? Oh, yeah.
Hiya, I'm another person from Black Country Radio. We were successful in getting the Queen's Award for voluntary service.
Yep.
And one of the things we discovered when we went through the process, it was about showcasing what we do. We're very good at going on air and going out and doing some amazing things. But we had to explain we were more than radio and the impact that we did. And that was a lot of hard work, and it was a learning curve for us, I think, because we're very good, we're all volunteers, and we do what's in front of us for a lot of community organisations. So if there's a way that the Community Fund can help with that, because, as with a lot of community organisations, we concentrate on what's in front of us.
Yep.
So when we have to say, well, what impact do you have? We don't have clients that walk in the door that need social care that we can then turn around and go, look, this is the impact. We offer a platform for those community organisations to make a difference in their communities, and that's a lot different, and it's very difficult to explain. So that might be something that you guys could do to support community radio.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why we haven't had a sort of a mass influx in applications from community radios, because that is really important to us. We have to demonstrate the impact of our funding, where our funding goes. So our funding comes from the lottery into the government and then out. We are very heavily audited and heavily scrutinised by the government. So we really have to sort of show where our funding goes and evidence the impact that's made. So.
Impact is really important, and actually one of the sessions later today is about on-air impact and the measurement of what you do with your audience, how we look at maybe measuring that as a sector. And then that, from the sounds of it, that kind of work is vital when you're trying to
Can
to do this.
Can I just add into that? There are some web pages, and I'm happy to ping them on to you. They're publicly available, but they're web pages for our grant holders, but actually they're really useful before coming to us. And there are a couple of pages around measuring your impact and evaluating. So if I ping the link across to you, would you share that? So it gives you some really good tips and tools on how you can sort of get the best out of what you do, really, and then use that to come to us. We do also fund, and we have funded organisations that have come to us to say, this is what we do, and this is how we measure it. However, we know we're some way behind on sort of gathering all that data and really using it to shout about what we do. And so we're able to fund consultants through part of the grant. So organisations are able to bring in an independent sort of person, a third pair of eyes, if you like, someone sort of fresh coming in and looking at how you collect data, how you measure the impact, sort of, and looking at that sort of really objectively and helping you to sort of better measure that going forward. So we can do that as part of a grant.
Hi, Phil from Oldham Community Radio. One of the challenges that we have is the concept of projects. You hit on it before, because in some ways our core aim is just to carry on running the community radio station, engaging volunteers, covering local events. And we've had it in the past with the Awards for All and with other funders as well, this thing of never seem interested in wanting to fund ongoing activities. They want us to package it in a new activity, but it's like, we don't want to do a new activity, we want to do what we're doing at the moment. Any sort of advice about how we could access your funding in?
Yeah, so Awards for All is a little bit different because Awards for All is a short and sharp project. So Awards for All is not designed to fund something that is ongoing. Reaching communities is different because we're funding over a long period of time. We do have organisations that come to us to say, we want funds to do what we do, to cover our core costs and deliver this. To us, it's a project because it's a set period and there's set milestones. So we will fund up to 5 years. We are not massively keen on continuation funding. So within those 5 years, we want to understand what plans you have for sustaining the project or the activities outside that period. And it might be around, you might need some help or support from a consultant to think about your fundraising strategy or a business strategy to help you in diversifying your income. We have funded organisations, again, but it's been maybe for, this might sound like a bit of a contradiction, either a more focused application. So if something comes out and you find you're working with maybe more young people that have been excluded from school, and you think, actually, we want to do a piece of work specifically with those going forward, we have funded that. Or consequently, something maybe that's a little more distilled, so working with a wider beneficiary group, a wider area. So we do that, but generally not exactly the same again, because we want to know how the last 5 years has fed into your learning going forward. Because I'm going to be honest, if someone comes to me after a 5-year grant to say we want to do exactly the same thing again, I'm going to be saying, I don't think you've got the eyes and ears of your community, because their needs have changed so much over the last 5 years. It's not possible to deliver the same thing in the same way 5 years down the line. In the couple of stations that I've seen where they have had reaching communities, it's where they've taken the station from sort of this level and they've used the reaching communities to take the station to this level and then used it to make them sustainable at that level. It's sort of, almost like they've used it almost as a growth piece of funding, which is why I wanted to encourage you here to talk about this kind of thing. We'll do things like the training. I mean, people coming in and contribute to training, you've got sort of corporate organisations coming in front of training. That's absolutely fantastic and phenomenal way of supporting yourself going forward over the next sort of, however many decades. And it's that sort of stuff that we want to see. We're not saying if we fund an organisation now in 5 years' time, you need to have these plans in place because that's what you told us 5 years ago. But we want to see that you're thinking about it and your plans are not to put all your eggs in one basket consistently, because we will not fund any one organisation over 10, 15, 20 years. We have lots of different organisations coming to us at the same time, and it is absolutely not fair to give one organisation more than a few bites of the cherry, because we need to be reactive to what's coming in and needs as well. So, and we wouldn't want an organisation to not be in a stronger position at the end of our grant than they were at the start.
Hello, I'm
Hello.
Barry from Whitney Radio in Oxfordshire. Thank you for an excellent presentation. We've received the smaller grant funding.
Yep.
It was the easiest application we've ever done, and if you haven't done one for anybody else in the room, do it now because it's very good.
Yep.
However, as a sector, we're being given something through Ofcom from DCMS called small-scale DAB.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the very same sector, community radio, is being pushed out by commercial people because they don't have the necessary funds in the bank to proceed further with rolling out small-scale DAB, which is the future.
Yeah.
I just wonder if there's any way that we could, as a sector, reach out to the National Lottery to try and make you aware that there would be many applications for the same thing in different areas with the same goals to get more people broadcasting on digital radio. Is there any way we can speak to you so that when you get an application, some of the hard work to justify the existence of that is actually already done? So as you said earlier, by your own admittance, you don't fund that much community radio. Maybe is there a way that we could speak to the National Lottery and say, look, these are applications, you know, you can go to Ofcom, you can go to DCMS and see what they're trying to roll out. But there's just resistance from a majority of community stations that just quite simply haven't got the funds in the bank to roll out across the area and communities where they are.
I mean, there's various routes, I think, practically that organisations could go down to rather than lots of different funding applications coming at the same time. You know, you're part of a network. Would it be appropriate for a network to apply? So as a consortia, you're coming in and it's one application rather than, you know, a number. And you know, and that's easier to grant manage for us, and it's you're having one conversation with one person rather than, you know, a whole load of different conversations in different regions which do operate differently and have got different priorities. So, you know, that might be an option. But absolutely, yeah. So whichever route it comes in, if it comes into a local officer like myself, we all use the same grant management system around the UK, so it's about us sort of making sure that we're putting that narrative onto the system for any other grant manager that comes in.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining
Not a
us
problem.
here.